Alright, Shalom. Before I begin, I'd like to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shai Bahashem, Rachak Wadash. I'd like to say double honors to my teachers, the apostles and the elders and bishops of Great Millstone, the men whom I've learned this truth from. And I'd also like to say Shalom and salutations to the elect that's out there preaching this word in truth and sincerity. Alright, I'm the brother Shaquat from the branch of Great Millstone, Montreal. Back once again with another lesson. And this lesson that I'm going to be getting into today, it's going to be a brief and to the point lesson, Lord willing. And it's just going to be going into the fact that, briefly touching on the fact that, righteousness is not measured by how well you can keep the law, right? Because you have other Israelite camps out there that basically, make the emphasis on the law and keeping the law, not understanding that in the position that we're in our current condition, it's nearly impossible to keep each and every law to the T. So that's basically a lack of understanding on their part, on their teacher's part, and they're teaching their congregation that, right? Because, for example, you have IUIC, which basically forces the law down people's throats, man. The law, the law, the law. They make an emphasis, a heavy emphasis on that, but they don't understand that that's not really the standard of righteousness, because the Lord understands that in this condition that we're in, we cannot really keep the laws to its perfection. The Lord knows that. The Lord's fair, so He made a way that we could be justified, and that's through Yahweh Shai. That's through faith and belief in Yahweh Shai, because that's what Yahweh Shai came to do. Yahweh Shai didn't come to destroy the law like He said, but He came to fulfill it, because what I'm saying is not to say that, okay, we don't have to keep the laws or whatever. No, man, we still have to keep the laws that we can keep. We still have to rehearse the righteous acts. Matter of fact, let me start there, because the fact that we can't keep the law, statutes, and commandments to the best of our ability in this condition, in this current captivity, does not give us liberty to basically be wicked. This is the book of, I'm gonna grab it on my phone, Judges 5 and verse 11. It says, "They that are delivered from the noise of archers in the places of drawing water." Right. So this is a prophetic precept, in the book of Judges, which is in the Old Testament. Also going to show you that in the Old Testament there are still prophecies that are contained in the Old Testament, and we're reading one right now. And that day that are delivered from the noise of archers is the Israelites. The noise of archers meaning these nuclear missiles, the nuclear missiles, man. Because they're known as arrows. And an archer is a man that handles arrows. When you go to the book of 2nd Ezra 16, it speaks about the mighty archer, which shooteth the arrow, a strong archer that shot an arrow from one end of the earth even onto the other. That's symbolic for missiles, right? So because America It's going to be destroyed. The United States of America is going to be destroyed by what? Nuclear fire, by missiles, through missiles. And there's going to be Israelites that are going to be delivered from that destruction, and that's going to be the elect, right? So that's that they that are delivered from the noise of archers in the places of drawing water, and drawing water symbolic to slavery, servitude under another nation. And this is the land of our captivity as well. America is a part of the nation of Israel's captivity. It says, there shall they rehearse the righteous acts of the Lord. And what's the righteous acts of the Lord? Keeping the law, statutes, and commandments. But putting an emphasis on the rehearsal of it, meaning that we're not going to get it perfect, but we're going to attempt to get it perfect. Just like a play. A play, you don't get perfect on the first goal. You have to rehearse it a couple times and basically still get it to as close as perfect as possible. Because you never know, right? Even when the actual show comes, you might have a couple slip ups or some things that are off script, and then you have to impromptu it, and just do it and just go with the flow and try to pick up from the mistake that was made by anybody, because mistakes are inevitable, right? And that's the case with us, man. The law, statutes, and commandments. It says, there shall they rehearse the righteous acts of the Lord, even the righteous acts towards the inhabitants of his villages in Israel. And then shall the people of the Lord go down to the gates. Right. So right now we're in a rehearsal stage, right? That does not mean the laws are done away with, because we can't keep each and every one of them, but we try our best to keep the ones that we can, because there's some things that are out of our power. For example, there's laws. Matter of fact, right? Because when you're dealing with the law, statutes, and commandments, real quick, this is from the AI overview, and I put how many laws are actually in the Bible. It says the Bible contains a multitude of laws and rules, but most commonly cited number is 613. Right? So there's 613 laws and rules in the scriptures, man. And that contains the 10 Commandments, and other laws, such as that deal with life, ritual practices, social conduct, and dietary restrictions, man. A dietary law. So there's a whole bunch of laws. But even though there's a lot, there's still some that we can keep because it's in our power to. For example, eating pork. You have the ability and to eat pork or not eat pork. We have that power, you can make a conscious decision, and it's in the power of your hands to be like, yo, I'm not gonna eat this, versus something like your fabric, which you have a decision to make. You have power to a certain extent, but not everybody is well off to the point where they can get their clothing tailor made, a specific fabric, and so on and so forth, right? Or a woman's menstrual. You can't avoid that, no matter what, man. Because there's women all around. There's women in your workplace that might be on her menstrual, which is unclean, because according to the law, you're not supposed to be nowhere near a woman that's on her menstrual. But you have the power to control who you're around, what woman you're around. No, not in this society, not in the current condition we're in. So that's what makes it hard and damn near impossible. And there's countless other laws just like that we can't really do anything about. But then there's some that we could do something about, like what we eat. you know. So let's go from there. So yeah, so our righteousness is not measured based on how well we keep the law, but it's based on our faith in the Lord Yahweh Shai. So let me get this in the book of James real quick. 2 James chapter 2 and verse 10, it says, for whosoever shall keep the whole law and yet so it says, for whosoever shall keep the whole law and yet offend in one point, he is guilty of all. Right, so that's also another reason why it's impossible to basically keep each and every law, because if you set your mind to keeping each and every law, right, and you offend in one point, no matter what point it is, you're basically guilty of every one, of breaking every one. So it's like, yo, you know, like I said, in this society, it's, yo, you can't keep every one, you know. Verse 11, for he that said, do not commit adultery, said also, do not kill. Now, if thou commit no adultery, yet if thou kill, thou art become a transgressor of the law, right? Right? So yeah, that's what it is, man. If you offend in one point, if you go off in one point, and you're basically guilty of breaking every one. That's also another reason why you can't keep the law to the best of our ability. That's why our righteousness is not measured by how well we keep the law. It's another reason. So let me go to Matthew 23 and verse 23, and I'm going to get it in Bible Hub. I want to read a specific commentary that I ran into, and that's Matthew Pooley's commentary. It says, right, matter of fact, let me read the precept first. Matthew 23. On my phone, I'm going to pull it up. Matthew 23 and verse 23, woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for ye pay tithe of mint and anise and cumin, and have omitted the weightier matters of the law, judgment, mercy, and faith. These ought ye to have done, and not to leave the others undone. All right, so that's what I wanted to get in the commentary, and this is Mark Pooley's commentary. It says, we have much the same, Luke 11 and 42. Only there it is, ye tithe mint and rue, all manner of herbs, and pass over judgment and the love of the Most High. It is manifest by our Savior's words in the latter part of the verse. These are ye have done, that he doeth not blame the Pharisees' exactness in tithing mint, anise, rue, and cumin, and all manner of herbs, but they're neglecting the weightier matters of the law, faith, and love to the Most High, judgment and mercy. Right. The Levites having no inheritance, the Most High ordained tithes for their maintenance, of which also the poor were to have a share. Leviticus 27 and 30, Numbers 18 and 24. The Pharisee boasted, Luke 18 and 12, that he paid tithe of all that he possessed. Yahushua here acknowledgeth that the Pharisees were exact in their paying tithes, but he blames them for their partiality, for their hypocrisy, right? Partiality says neglecting the weightier things of the law. For their hypocrisy, they were only exact in these little things, that they might be taken notice of us scrupulous observers of divine law, while they omitted those things which were of much more weight, which he reckoneth up: faith, by which some understand faith in the Most High, with the most faithfulness and sincere and honest dealings with men, in opposition to fraud and cheating and circumventions. So the Pharisees were basically neglecting the weightier matters of the law, or what weighed more. They were only focused on how they were perceived outwardly and the things that they did that would appear, or to make them appear righteous. That's what they were worried about. But there's weightier matters of the law, right? Like the Lord was going into, which was loving the Most High with all thy heart, and basically loving thy brother as thyself, which fall under the category of what? Judgment and mercy. If you love your brother, you're going to be fair to him, So let me get this real quick. Because Yahushua basically just summarized, he made it easier for us by summarizing what the law, statutes, and commandments basically equal up to, or what they measure up to, what they let's see, what the conclusion of them are, right? Because matter of fact, let's get it. Matthew 22 and verse 37 says, matter of fact, 34. But when the Pharisees had heard that he had put the Sadducees to silence, they were gathered together. And one of them, which was a lawyer, asked him a question, tempting him, and saying, Master, which is the greatest commandment in the law? Yahushua said unto him, Thou shalt love the Lord thy power with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like unto it, Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. So this is what the laws, statutes, and commandments basically sum up to, is to love the Most High, with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind, and to love your neighbor as yourself. That's what it sums up to. So if you just keep that, you'll be good. You won't have to worry about keeping each and every detailed law, what you wear, what but because that also cultivates a mindset, loving the Most High with all your heart and soul and mind, and treating your brother as yourself. That cultivates a righteous mindset, which that's what the law was supposed to do. So yeah, man. Lord willing, this lesson was edifying. I want to say call Halayim La, Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, Bahashim, Ruach HaKodesh. Once again, double honors to my teachers, the apostles, bishops, and elders of Great Millstone, the men whom I've learned this truth from. And I would also like to say Shalom as salutations to the elect. Until next time, Shalom.